Good evening everyone, my name's Chris Nitzo. This is an Oz Cyclone Chasers Cyclone video update for the Australian region, issued on the 23rd of January 2014. Tonight we're going to cover a couple of topics, and the first one being the Western Australian low, the second one being what is going on in the Coral Sea. And just to give you the short story now, we're not going to give you any definites in the Coral Sea, definitely not, because it is just too complex still. So if you're waiting to see if you will or won't get rain, I'm sorry, we can't tell you yet. But anyway, if you're interested more in the science about it, stick with us. Alright, let's talk about the WA system and the current monsoon. Looking at the current monsoon, over the past 24 hours we can see a lot of wind shear here in the Timor Sea, streaming these thunderstorms from east to west, but we can see the entire monsoon trough is reasonably active. Probably not as active as it was a week ago, but it's still very active in terms of what we've seen this season. So the top end region copping a lot of thunderstorm activity that extends into the Gulf of Carpentaria and into the peninsula. Over the Cairns region they saw some pretty good rain today too, with a little bit of a mid-level disturbance pushing over the top of the region and enhanced by very moist lower level flow. Over the Coral Sea we see a general increase in or continual increase in convective activity, although we do find it hard to find any of that convective activity that's actually starting to show signs of tropical low structure or any type of rotation out there just yet. So we're still waiting for the development of a tropical low. Look, what we're expecting to see is there's a tropical low off your screen here around Vanuatu that will push in a southwest direction and make it into the eastern Coral Sea, and then we expect that low to push in a southerly direction following on from that. The other thing that we're looking at in the future is a tropical low possibly forming much closer to the Queensland coast early to mid next week, and once again the guidance on that one is very unclear as to where it goes. There is a low expected to develop here over the top end and push in a westerly direction to be located around the North Kimberley region, but you can see already just so much wind shear in this area, so nothing in the next 2 or 3 days will fire in this area just because of the amount of wind shear. And then in the future that wind shear actually extends a long way further to the south, and so the tropical low in a nutshell will track in a southwesterly direction, but will continually be faced with unfavourable shear conditions, and we'll talk about that now. Looking at the latest update from the Bureau of Meteorology for the Western Australian region. Sorry, not sure what happened there. I showed you the wrong one. The Western Australian region, which is this one here, we expect, or the BOM expects on Friday, that a weak low is going to get out there in the Timor Sea, probably somewhere around the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf, and then get into the North Kimberley during the weekend. Once again, I showed you the wind shear out there is horrendous at the moment, so we're not expecting that to develop. It's not expected to reach cyclone intensity. The system is going to be monitored for development early next week as it tracks southwest off the Pilbara coast. Conditions are not entirely favourable for development of this system, and the likelihood of it becoming a TC, Sunday they just increased slightly to low, which is 5 to 20%. I would be hazarding a guess that low is in the low end of the low, if you like, so it'd be more around the 5 to 10% as opposed to the 20% mark. Let's have a look now at why. We've got a lot of new people here in Oz Cyclone Chasers, and some of you don't even know what the hell I'm talking about when I mention vertical wind shear. Basically, this is it. So what we might have at the surface is some very light winds. Above that, we have winds that are stronger, 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 and stronger still. Now, what happens is what you see here is the thunderstorm tries to develop, but what happens is the top of it gets cut off or sheared away, and so what we're left with is the cyclone or the low finds it very difficult to develop that thunderstorm over a central point. So if we're looking for severe thunderstorms, this type of shear condition is great. If we're looking for tropical cyclones, it is disastrous, and that's what we're going to be seeing over WA over the next 3 to 5 days at least. Now, bearing in mind that wind shear can come from different directions too, so in this diagram you're seeing the winds are coming from one direction at varying speeds. Oftentimes in the atmosphere we actually have winds coming at different directions, which even adds further to the wind shear values. So on Sunday morning, if we use the GFS chart here, because it shows the low up a little bit better than the European chart, on Sunday morning we have the tropical low just to the north of Broome. Now if we look at the European chart for Sunday morning as well, and looking at comparing the two different model guidances, you can see the European really doesn't have this system anywhere, but if we were to plot it, you could plot a broad and general low pressure region just in through here. And looking at then the shear forecast for that particular time on both the GFS and the European, we can see that on the GFS chart the wind shear values are about moderate where the system lies out here. You're looking at 20 knots or so of wind shear, which is around about the borderline. Any more than that and tropical cyclones just cannot possibly form. Any less than that, it becomes very favourable for cyclones to form. So you can see out here to the north of the system some really strong shear conditions, and over the top of the system you still have moderate shear, and you can see this very clearly here in the European model, where we see that that region just off the coast of Broome, right on the coast, is very favourable, but once you get off the coast you start to get into moderate to strong wind shear, and so that's going to limit the system's development in the initial stages and possibly further on as well. And once again, if we head towards Monday morning, we see that there's still moderate wind shear here, very high wind shear just to the north of the system in the GFS model. The European model also has quite moderate to high levels of vertical wind shear here around where the system is located, and just to show you where it is located on Monday, you can see here it's really on the edge of a lot of wind shear, so it's going to find it very difficult to develop convection around the central point, or around the center of the low level circulation center. Now if we continue following the European model through the period and we head towards Tuesday morning, we see that the system continues to track in a southwest or west direction. Look, there's all the likelihood that it's going to be a reasonable tropical low. We're not talking a completely completely terrible system. What we're saying, though, is that it's unlikely to form into anything significant in terms of wind damage. This is the GFS forecast for Tuesday morning. Once again, you can see the system possibly developing gales there on the western quadrant, and once again, if we look at wind shear to see if things get better for it as it heads southwest along the coast or near the coast, we can see that the GFS continues to have just moderate pockets of wind shear. Look, that's not all too unfavourable, but it's not quite favourable enough for it to intensify rapidly, and the European itself in the same region puts a lot more wind shear than the GFS. So the European keeps it a lot weaker than the GFS because the European keeps a lot more wind shear over the top of the center of the system. So therefore, folks, we're not looking at a significant tropical cyclone here, but we could be looking at some significant rainfall developing along the coastline as the system tracks southwestwards. And once again, that depends on how close the system is to land. So we can see as the low sort of is in this region here on the Friday tomorrow, we will see a lot of rainfall in the far northern Kimberley. As we head to Saturday, that rainfall heads towards the northwestern Kimberley and then tracks sort of down the coast as we head to Sunday and Monday, and it mostly, depending once again on the exact track of the system, if it remains well offshore, most of the rain will too. If it gets a bit closer to shore like the European is suggesting, then you're going to see a lot higher rainfalls along the coastline. So at this stage it's a bit of a touch and go as to how far off the coast it gets, so fingers crossed that for the Pilbara, particularly the West Pilbara, who missed out on this last particular low, they do get a bit of rain from this one if it remains closer to the coast. So as we look towards days 4 to 8, we're starting to see more and more guidance suggesting that this thing remains offshore, and so all the really heavy rain remains offshore. But even the Pilbara coastline getting 25 to 50 mils in a lot of parts, and 15 plus mils in the parts that do miss out on that heavier stuff. So look, it's going to provide some rain. I think we really hope that it gets a bit closer than the modelling suggests here, just to give this West Pilbara a bit more of a drenching than that. But once again, this track here keeps it well offshore. If the track gets a bit closer, this heavy rain gets a bit closer. At this stage, though, the model guidance suggests it's going to remain a reasonable distance offshore, which means most of the heaviest rain will remain a reasonable distance offshore as well. Alright, that's where we'll leave the WA one. We're talking Queensland now. Queenslanders, unfortunately the guidance still is not giving us very clear indications of what is going to happen in the longer term. What we can tell you is what's going to happen in the short to medium term, and then we can only guess after that. So what we might do tonight, we'll talk about the Coral Sea in the short to medium term. We won't attack the Coral Sea after about Monday. So we'll talk about what will happen up to Monday, and then the really part that's really interesting from Monday on, we'll have a couple of guesses at it, but they're only guesses, okay, because the guidance is just not good enough. Alright, so this is from the Bureau of Meteorology. The monsoon is expected to strengthen early next week. It's difficult to target specific areas, once again, because we've got very poor model guidance at the moment. The likelihood of a tropical cyclone in the Coral Sea is low on Sunday, so that increases slightly on the Sunday to the 5 to 20% range. So that's a positive sign that something's going to form there. Maybe not Sunday, but early next week. On further investigation from the Bureau of Meteorology in Vanuatu, the Vanuatu Met Office says that there is a low pressure region already developed out there. It's about 1,000 hectopascals, located about 12.5 south, 165.6 east at 4 p.m. today, Queensland time. This is about 110 kilometres west of Torres Island. The system will take a west-southwest track in the next 2 days. That puts it very close to Queensland's area by the 2-day mark. The potential for the low pressure system to become a tropical cyclone is low to moderate, so the likelihood of a cyclone in Vanuatu's region as we head towards Saturday, Sunday becomes moderate and continues to be moderate on Monday and Tuesday, just because of the confusion as to whether the system will lie in Vanuatu or whether the system will lie in the Coral Seas Queensland area of responsibility. NOAA in America are tracking the system a long way further to the east-northeast though than what the Vanuatu Bureau is suggesting it's located at, and they're tracking the center of the system out here. Look, at this stage it's very weak, and it really doesn't matter where that low is positioned because it's likely to be repositioned a number of times as it heads towards the west-southwest. So looking at some of the modelling, thanks to WeatherZone, for your weather graphics at weatherzone.com.au, you can see here, according to the Bureau of Meteorology's medium range or short range model, the Access R model, we can see the low here around Vanuatu this morning at 10 a.m. We can see the low pushing in a westerly direction or west-southwest direction, still very broad and still pretty weak out here tomorrow. At 10 a.m. we see it just outside the area of responsibility for Australia. As we head towards Saturday, we see it right around that 160 mark, which is the Australian mark, or the area of Australian responsibility there. We see it right along that line. Just out of interest too, we see that WA low not developing significantly, but packing a fair bit of rainfall associated with it too. But anyway, back onto the Queensland one, we do see it continuing to push in a west-southwest direction at that point in time. Very, very slowly though. By Sunday, we start to see some deepening of the system, but we also, interestingly, start to see it drift in a more southwesterly direction. So it starts to drift in a more poleward direction, and we see that the system in the further term, or in the medium term, the Access G model, if we allow the Access G model, which is the global model from the Bureau, to take over, this is where it's got it on the Sunday. The Monday, it pushes in almost a due south direction. Tuesday continues to push in a south to south-southwest direction, and on Wednesday it continues to push in that south-southwest direction. Now that's as far as we're going to take it, because after that the model does do some interesting things, but the variability in the guidance becomes too great, and so we don't have confidence in that. So at this stage though, a west-southwest and then a more poleward direction, and look, that's pretty well what a lot of the other models are going for as well. Looking at the GFS, starting on the Saturday morning, we see this broad area of low pressure here to the west of Vanuatu. As we head toward Sunday, we see that area developing and pushing more in a south-southerly direction. On Monday, still hasn't really tightened up into a very noted circulation in terms of a tropical cyclone, so it's still quite a broad system. By Tuesday, still not tightening up quite enough to be a TC yet. and same thing by Wednesday. So it's still a pretty broad elongated tropical low there, and really staying out in the eastern Coral Sea, so not posing a threat to Queensland at least in the next 5 to 6 days. After that, the model guidance tends to either drift it to the west or drift it or keep pulling it south or southeast. Now it's interesting to note we've got a nice big high in here in the Tasman, but we've also got, a lot of the guidance is showing us that we've got an upper level trough in through here too. So unfortunately at this stage this does not look like it's going to head towards Queensland. What we're interested in around Queensland is something else that could form around about that time on Tuesday or Wednesday. So this is our Vanuatu low on the Tuesday according to the European model. You can see the circulation right there where my cursor is, but there's also a secondary circulation out here in the northwestern Coral Sea. Now that's the one we're a little bit interested in as Oz cyclone chasers, and obviously if you're on the Queensland coast, this one should be the one you're a little bit more interested in at that point in time. As we head to Tuesday night, we see the system out there in the northwest Coral Sea, and then as we head towards Wednesday morning, the system remains a feature out here in the northwest Coral Sea. Does not develop significantly though, whereas the Vanuatu low does start to develop reasonably slowly, but we do start to see gales on the northern side of it, so it may just become a TC around about that time. But the Coral Sea system is there in some of the guidance at the moment, particularly from the European, so it is something we will need to monitor, as well as the European ensemble, which does suggest that something's going to fire in this area. Now whether or not it gets to the coast or whether it just hovers off the coast, not quite sure on yet. The guidance is not very certain on that at all. It's important to know, folks, that even with this, even by showing you this, this is not set in stone. At this point in time, this particular model is struggling with the fact that there are two lows in the Coral Sea. The first one in that Vanuatu one that I've just shown you, and this second one developing along a monsoon trough. So it has a lot of different lows in the area. So it may be struggling to determine the steering mechanisms and steering flows and just generally what these lows are going to do because of their interactions. So do bear that in mind, that what I'm showing you here is not necessarily going to happen. It's certainly a model that's struggling with things. And look, this is our #1 go-to model, and it really is struggling with things at the moment and has been for the last couple of days. So if we look at the ensemble guidance from the European, we can see that overall the model members are predicting a low to be located in the central Coral Sea on Tuesday morning. But there is some variability here, particularly on that southeastern edge of that 1004 hectopascal line, and we can see that there's some of the guidance suggesting maybe a deeper system is located a little bit further to the east. Now as we head towards the Wednesday next week, we see that there starts to be a lot of variability all through the Coral Sea, and that could be because they're picking up that tropical low just off the North Queensland or far North Queensland coast, as well as the deeper low that is out here in the eastern Coral Sea. As we head towards day 7, which is the Thursday, we're starting to see in the ensemble guidance a tropical low possibly forming in the southern Gulf of Carpentaria as well, or it could have been a weak tropical low that developed off the far North Queensland coast and pushed in a westerly direction. And then really after that, by Friday and then Saturday and then Sunday, the model does lose a lot of confidence in what it's showing, just because we start to see a lot of variability all the way from sort of the Cairns region all through the to the southwest Pacific, as well as we see low pressure systems possibly in the Gulf of Carpentaria. So really folks, there's very little guidance once we get past about Monday as to what's going to happen here, but we do need to be aware that there is certainly some guidance showing a tropical low forming off the far North Queensland coast, and then not quite sure what it's going to do from there as to whether it travels southeast or whether it travels west onto the coast. The key thing that's drawing a lot of doubt into the future track of these things is what's happening in the mid-levels at the time. So if we now look towards Tuesday the 28th, we have a big high here in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, and that's going to try and drag a lot of this stuff out to the west. Now further out here in the southern parts of the Coral Sea, we actually see a bit of a trough. It's not showing up on your screen quite just yet, but what's going to happen is that trough is going to try and push things towards the south-southeast. Now, as we head towards the Wednesday and the Thursday, the troughing type thing really comes into the fore as we head towards particularly Thursday. You can see here on the Thursday that the trough extends a long way further to the north, and we can tell that through the variability in the guidance. Now, what that also tells us, though, these colouring shows us that the guidance is not very reliable, because there is a lot of difference in variability in that guidance. So overall, we know that there's going to be an upper ridge over the central part of Australia. There's very little variability in that. But what's going to happen around the Coral Sea and the Tasman Sea out here, there's a lot of variability in. So there is no confident forecast of the upper levels as we head towards Wednesday and Thursday next week. So we don't know what this is going to do in the long term in terms of the steering mechanisms for these lows or cyclones. That's why we can't give you definitive areas of where they're going to form and definitive tracks of where they're going to go. Alright, so I've already looked at WA's rainfall. So looking at the Northern Territory and Queensland region, we can see that the Northern Territory is going to still see a lot of rainfall tomorrow along that northwestern coast on that northwesterly monsoon. The Queensland coast, we're going to see some more shower activity around that north tropical coastline. As we head to Saturday, we're going to see that area of showers getting much more coastal in the northwestern top end, or the western top end now. We're going to see those showers around Cairns really ease off on the Saturday, which is good for your long weekend. You can go out and enjoy it a little bit more in the outdoors. But we're still going to see some shower and storm activity over the peninsula. Then as we head towards Sunday, though, it starts to get a little bit more interesting for northern central inland Queensland, where we're going to start to see some showers and storms on the Sunday through this region here as we get some moisture feeding into a trough system. And then as we head to Monday, we'll see rainfall really increasing around the north tropical coast, anywhere north of about Townsville. We're going to see a lot more rainfall falling. And also the Gulf country is going to see a lot more rain with increased instability in this region here on the Monday. Around the top end coastline, we're going to see a little bit more rain in the central northern regions of the top end. And we're going to see some more rain really getting into the central parts of the Northern Territory itself. So getting into even the desert regions, we're going to see some shower and storms. So for the next 4 days all up, we're still looking at some very heavy falls over the northwest top end coastline, so 100 millimetres plus over 4 days, which is fantastic rain. And we're going to start to see that increase in shower and storm activity over northern Queensland generally, and so places that haven't received much rain might receive, 15 plus millimetres. That's the next 4 days. As we head past the long weekend, or from the Monday onwards, Monday to the Thursday, we're going to see a lot more rainfall along the north tropical coastline around Queensland, and possibly going to see an increase in rainfall over the central coast or the Wide Bay Burnett region. So we might actually see some more rainfall there, possibly getting into some heavy falls of rain there at this stage. We'll talk about that as it gets a little bit closer though, because at this stage that's still up in the air as to whether we're going to see that happen. But overall, North Tropical Coast is going to see a lot more rain. The west coast of the peninsula is going to see a lot more rain. Torres Strait Islands are going to get very active as well. And also the northeastern parts of the top end coastline will start to fire in that 4 to 8 day period. A little bit less rain over the northwestern parts of the top end as the tropical low pushes to the west into Western Australia. You're still going to be left with a pretty decent monsoon though, so you're still going to see some showers, storms, and just generally general falls really extending a long way inland. Alright folks, thanks for watching tonight. Our next update tomorrow night. We'll try and get them a bit shorter now because there's no cyclones imminent, but we've explained now what's happening in Queensland, and even though it's complex, we'll try and keep it a bit more simple over the next couple of days and keep it shorter. Thanks for watching tonight. We'll talk to you again on the 24th of January.